Welcome to Archery Country Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to Archery Country Podcast. This is your host, Big Wade, as we are in the home studio today, the archery shop downstairs, taking care of some awesome business on a rainy day, as we need to talk to a gentleman that knows nothing but awesomeness when it comes to turning your clothing into gear. You already know what we're talking about because you've seen it on your screen, but we have Mr. Chris Derrick, who is our product line manager in the Whitetail setup, coming to us. How you doing, Chris?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, absolutely. We're glad to have you, bud. And what we really wanted to have our most knowledgeable individual to talk about some of the awesome gear that we have today. We're going to talk a little bit about the brand new Equinox Guard, your guys' turkey vest, and then we're really going to dive into our whitetail clothing, which is kind of your bread and butter that's kind of your engineering setup. You designed it all and you know how it all works. So we'll kind of just sit back and enjoy and listen to what we have to offer. Chris, so if you don't mind, give us a little background, where you're from, what you've been doing, how long you've been with Sitka, and how the journey got started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I've been with Sitka for 5 years. I'm originally from the southeast United States, so I kind of say Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina. Lived a good portion of my life there, and I currently live in Montana. I remember at one point I've always worked in an outdoor space, but my wife said, if you could work anywhere, where would you like to work? I was like, I don't know, Sitka. And she went on to their site and she was like, I think they have a job that is your job. So,
are you serious? That's how it started?
Yep, that's how I got here. So
how big of a change was it going from down in Alabama to the Rocky Mountains and cowboy setup in Montana?
For me, it's great. Our family absolutely loves it here. We never want to leave. So it's a great area. Montana has a lot for you. All different types of hunting, new types of hunting to learn, and everything from elk, turkeys, and pronghorn, and then whitetails, of course, are all available here.
That's kind of an animal. I went to school in Laramie, so a little bit south of where you're at, but when, coming from the Midwest and you southeast, and then we talk whitetails, like that's what we kind of talk about. That's our lingo. You go out west and you say whitetails, and most of your ranchers and farmers are like, well, they're nuisance. They're down by the river. If you want to go hunt them, yeah, I don't care. Do you experience that in Montana?
Especially when I first got here. I do feel like that's changing a little bit, the dynamic of that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely had heard the term land carp when I got here. So, it's great hunting around here, and the river bottom's really concentrated. It's a different style of hunting, I would say,
right,
than where I'm from. It's just a different approach. Big cottonwoods, lots of river bottoms where they're all concentrated, and it's not like a big wood setup that sometimes you guys get around your areas. So
yeah, and
there's some good ones here.
There are, definitely, the old white rack giants, as they call it. Chris, if you don't mind, for our listeners, and a lot of these listeners are already Sitka customers, but just a little history on Sitka. The story kind of lays out, it's a unique story from your guys' chief, and everything that's kind of trickled down, and now you've dabbled, not only is it just big game and whitetail, but we also have waterfowl set up and turkey on that. If you wouldn't mind, just a little bit of history of the company you're now with.
Yeah, so our founder, Jonathan Hart, when they were essentially starting the company, they were taking some of the regular hunting gear and on some big mountain hunts, and were just completely miserable, totally uncomfortable, because the gear wasn't set up with like a technical mountaineering mindset. So that's what they set out to change, and I think that it really has shifted the entire industry to start to think this way. But we essentially build all of our gear with that kind of same technical gear mindset. So when those guys are climbing on sheep hunts and stuff like that, they're actually thinking the same way. Mountaineering, somebody that's doing mountaineering about survival and those types of, and your gear can really make a difference. And then, from my space, if you just take that kind of same mindset, we usually have a short in the whitetail space, have a short period of maybe exertion while we're going to and from the stand, climbing, maybe setting a stand, depending on what you're doing. And then you have, anywhere from a 2-3 hour to all day sit where you really can't move and use your body heat to warm you back up. So, designing with trying to get the most out of the designs and the textiles we're using for those stationary sets to give the hunter the best experience, because everybody can relate to being miserable in the tree stand. I, when I was young in high school, just remember looking like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and, barely being able to move at all and still being uncomfortable. And now I can go in with, a system that's half as thin, if not more, and be way more comfortable.
Well, and I think a lot, coming from the heart of I say the Midwest is the heart of whitetail country, but pretty much if you say East River, but it's starting to prevail all over the United States. And sometimes if you don't have adequate gear and not pertaining to a bow and arrows and release and optics and all that, but the clothing that you're actually wearing is just as important or more important than the broadheads that you're shooting, if that makes sense. So
I would agree with that statement. I mean, you're wearing those every single hunt, right? For the entire sit.
Right.
As important it is the moment that you engage with the animal and release your arrow. If you're uncomfortable in your mind, I know I've been in that point where I just had my head leaned against the tree and just where you're just so uncomfortable, you're not paying attention to what's around.
I know it, having the right stuff makes you a better hunter. But where I kind of was going with that is there's individuals who may not hunt. Let's say it's freezing rain and it's 21 degrees on October 30th and the cool front is present. Obviously, your cameras are popping, but they will skip the morning hunt to hunt the evening, which if you have the right setup and if you know what you're doing, you're just going to, I don't get me wrong. There's a lot of hardcore guys where that wouldn't happen if you had a shooter showing up on camera, but I think your guys' videos, your knowledge, your representatives, and then, down the line, getting into like our level, as far as a pro shop level, having that knowledge and a lot of us have learned it the hard way, just spending the money and getting the product. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, man, this Stratus jacket is phenomenal. Like, I've never had a wind blocker that's quiet and looks good and they can't see me. And you guys go in very in depth. It's not just what's cool and what looks good. It's also, there's a ton of engineering, and that's where your background comes. I don't know if engineering's the right word, correct?
I would say, yeah, we work with textile engineers all the time. I even work with like sound engineers, when we did the Fanatic launch, so yeah, engineering's exactly right. I come from a family of engineers. My dad and my brother are both engineers.
So I gotta, like it sounds more like a dream job if you're trying to invent or make something better than you have, and you're playing with all the cool stuff. Like I didn't even know that a sound engineer, tie that to clothing. Now it makes perfect sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in noise, but there's people that, like, if it's funny, after working with James Black at Montana State University, like I was in a hotel the other day and was eating breakfast, and I was looking at the light fixture, and I was like, that light fixture is designed to dampen sound. So it's funny how you never see these things until you start to delve into it and understand like how acoustics works. But he's the guy that not even only in an office space, but like maybe a shopping center or whatever you walk in, he's somebody that they'll bring in and help control the acoustics. And if you ever walk into a place that has terrible acoustics, you start to pick up on it. And so that's what his job is.
Yeah, they're very, very smart. I got to ask you, when you came to Sitka, was it automatically, hey, Chris is going to take care of our whitetail stuff? Is that what you came in doing? Did it just kind of shift? You said 6 years? Yeah.
They brought me in because I'd grown up, out in the eastern United States or, hunting whitetails my entire life. So that was my bread and butter. And then, just having a technical apparel background that, allowed me to come in and apply my knowledge. And then we have just a huge, great network of field testers and visitors that we refer to as the SWAT crew for the whitetail team. And they can help me understand the nuances, because hunting Minnesota is not the same as hunting Pennsylvania or hunting West Virginia or hunting Alabama or Florida.
Absolutely.
Those are all different. They may be the same pursuit, but you can't apply always exactly what you're doing in one to the other. There are
exactly. So we kind of started down the road of whitetail, but I'm going to put a stop sign just for a second, if you don't mind, because what you and the team have done here, we're a week away from turkey opener in Minnesota. South Dakota, our neighboring state, has just opened. Missouri and Iowa are getting on the verge with their youth season in a couple weeks. You guys came out with a product called, Equinox has been out. That's the name of a certain clothing line. But what you guys have put into place is called Guard, and you were the chief engineer, when we talked about your line manager for product development. Where did this idea come from? Oh, I should first of all, let's explain what it is for our listeners, and then where did the idea, because I think it's probably the single greatest thing to happen to hunting apparel since camo was invented, in my mind.
Well, I definitely appreciate, and for me, it was a personal passion solving this. So the Equinox Guard system is essentially built for in between the two equinoxes when there's typically a lot of bugs, whether that be ticks, chiggers, and mosquitoes. Those are the big ones. Some depending on where you are, it might be no-see-ums as well, which are midges. But, it was all designed to basically limit contact with those types of insects and arachnids, but then also allow to keep you comfortable. So, I keep bees. It's not like I do get stung every so often. It's not about 100%. It is about reasonable protection with comfort. And that's finding that right balance. But like I said, it's a personal passion for me. Almost everybody that I know either has had somebody that they are in close contact, like a family member that has had maybe a tick-borne illness, or has had it themselves. So my own daughter had Lyme disease. She contracted Lyme disease when we lived in South Carolina. I worked with Dr. Carl Miller at UGA. He has had 2 tick-borne illnesses. I've got people in the office that tell their stories. I was telling this at a event the other day, talking about this, and a guy came up in the crowd and was like, I have alpha-gal. I can no longer eat red meat due to a tick bite. So, it's that for a hunter is the worst thing in the world. So trying to solve that was really a personal passion for me, because I'll never see, the number of illnesses we're preventing. But I can tell you, I've been wearing this for 3 years through the field test process, and I've had 0 ticks. And I'm a guy that would pull several off of me a year.
That's and I'm sorry to hear about your daughter. I hope everything's going good there. But it is true. We all know somebody at the pro shop. There was a Matthews pro shooter that shot target archery and had nothing to do with hunting. And then there's also a gentleman that we know very well, and it pretty much ruined their life as far as the outdoors and what they could and couldn't do. Now they're both survivors, but there's some lasting effects from it. So it's something to take very seriously.
I agree with you 100%. And, if you look at there's some great information out. Like if you just Google CDC tick-borne illness, there's a whole website that CDC has set up that talks about different types of illnesses and what they are, symptoms, which ticks are in your region. But, there may only be 100 and something thousand cases reported, but they think that it's completely underreported. So we think that there may be upwards between 300,000 and 600,000 tick-borne illnesses a year. So that's like essentially 500,000 cases a year in the United States. That's a That's a big problem. And so the way that this Equinox Guard system is, it essentially uses two means to be able to protect you. One is mechanical. That's, hey, stop the tick or stop the mosquito from contacting my body. The second portion of that is permethrin based, but it's not like a spray on permethrin. It is infused into the actual garment for the lifetime of the garment. So it's a special process that Insect Shield uses. It doesn't go through the fabric form. You can't do this in the fabric form and have it work. You have to take the finished garment, put it through this extremely high temperature process, and then when it comes out, they say 75 washes is what the efficacy rate they test to. That's about a lifetime of the garment, depending on how many times you wash a year. That's a long, long time.
Right.
But it has to work through that number of washes. And that's why it's extremely safe, because it is the lowest level of that's regulated by the EPA. I could put on a baby onesie because you never have to retreat again. So this isn't something you're needing to spray on, throw in your own washer. It is in the garment for the lifetime of the garment.
And it's a pretty big deal because all of us before this was, this came out just a little bit ago, but we've always had the sprays, right? Even to the basis of just mosquito repellent, which it just smells different in my mind. But there are some products that seem to work, and you and I were talking off air that there's certain levels that the spray is versus the stuff that's actually, heat treated and put in your garment. But it's something that works, and you can see it works, and it's been engineered. And so I got to ask you on, as far as the Sitka line, we say Equinox Guard, that right now we're pushing the Sub-Alpine, the turkey hunters. It's going to be in a few different patterns. Am I correct?
Yes, it will be an elevated 2. It's already an elevated 2, which for early season whitetail, and Sub-Alpine and timber. So, and I say this isn't just turkey. Turkey is what we're all thinking about now, right? It's
right.
Spring.
Yep.
But spring bear, moose, early teal, all of those types of hunting are typically done in the warm periods. So that's the patterns available, and the way that I mentioned, just to go back to a little bit about how the mechanical and chemical work together. When you look at the pant, for example, everything's centered around the pant. I think about ticks and chiggers, right?
Yep.
Because they're typically going to brush as you walk by, fall off a blade of grass, fall off a leaf, land on your pants, and they're typically going to crawl up the hem of your pant, along your boot, or they're going to crawl up along your waistline. So at the hem of the pant, we have a very, very lightweight internal gaiter. If you use this properly, you are very, very well protected. And you roll your sock. So you put on your pants, you put your sock over the gaiter. Tick comes in there, runs into that internal gaiter or the chigger, and then the permethrin starts to do its work. So there's a drop-away test that basically you measure how long it takes for them to fall off. So the idea behind that is the mechanical stops them from ever reaching your skin. Permethrin does its thing. They fall off. You don't bring them home, put them in your hamper, bring them into your home, to your family. That's how it works on the pant.
And as you move up from your pant, like we're saying, no, skin exposed, your waistline, we've talked about that a little bit. On the actual hoodie, is it called a hoodie? Yeah,
it is the Equinox. So it is a pant, a glove, and a hoodie. Right. And you're exactly right. It's built with a very, very long tail, so that you can tuck it in. I would encourage people to always tuck in. It seems so simple, but you wouldn't believe how many people don't do this.
Right.
You just tuck that in. Again, the tick is going to crawl up, and instead be able to enter under your and chiggers. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to getting those. They typically hit your waistline. Will run into the hoodie, and then again won't be able to get through. And then that hoodie is developed with an extremely high gauge knit. So this is netted on a very specialized machine. There's not a whole lot of machines that can do this in the world. We had to actually go and I worked with our textile engineer, Christina Rappa, and we were trying to find a extremely high gauge knitter to be able to develop this textile, and then that had the right properties. And then we partnered with a third party lab that's basically an insect testing facility. So if you wanted to do, any treatments, or even if people, companies that release mouse traps, they send them to this company for testing. And we developed a test with them where it's a heated blood membrane. And what we do is we take the heated blood, we heat it, it gets heated up in an instrument, and then you apply different types of textile to the bottom of that heated blood membrane. There's a cage with 20 Aedes aegypti female mosquitoes. The females are all that are feeding on you. The males don't. And they go in there, you release them in there for 20 minutes, and then afterwards you pull the cage out, you put it in a freezer. That makes the mosquitoes fall down. Then you pull them out, and it's super simple. You just squish them. And if they turn red, they fed. And if they didn't, then if they're just black, then we know they didn't feed. So we can actually start to figure out which textiles have mechanical properties that prevent feedings. So so if the mosquito lands on you, they'll start searching on you with their proboscis trying to pierce, and they have a very difficult time getting through it. And it's extremely lightweight, super thin. And that's the idea about comfort when it's hot, because there's other methods out there. You can wear some solutions that are like a 3D mesh. Well, it's very hard to shoot a bow with those
yeah.
thick gloves on and that setup. You can put DEET. We all know the problem with DEET. You can use spray-on repellents that have scent. Thermacell, I think, is a great product, but it does have a scent from a whitetail standpoint.
Yep.
And then there's some where you can wear double layers, but who wants to wear double layers when it's 95 degrees outside? So this really strikes the right balance between reasonable protection and comfort, I say.
And what we'll do in the bottom of this podcast or down in our links, we're actually going to tie your video, because it's you guys explain it, and you actually have video of how this machine works and the different textiles and the mosquitoes, and then it shows the process of, your product or control, figuring out which mosquitoes fed and which didn't. But something that was intriguing to me, yes, turkey, obviously, early season bear. We also talk about your early season whitetail. But something that I don't know has been mentioned, and I'm going to do it, is so I have the Equinox Guard, set up for turkey hunting. I'm going to do that. But when it comes time to setting my trail cameras, and it's July, or setting some tree stands and some new sets, that's when the heart of, and I'm talking ticks here in Minnesota, and mosquitoes as well, but you don't want to go out there with a pair of Sitka shorts and a t-shirt, a white t-shirt, let alone. And I know it's hot and all that, but if you can use this in different situations, you're protecting yourself year round, not just when you're sitting in the stand or in the ground blind, or in a bush somewhere trying to hide from it. You can utilize this anytime that you're out there.
Absolutely. As soon as it's warm and walking in the woods, I typically will put it on. And for me, it's just, I don't want to wind up with it, because it's kind of a hidden thing, right? And then there's some of the viruses that ticks out, they can infect you with a bacterial issue. But then there's also some other ones that are viral based, that they don't take very long to transmit them through your body. So like Lyme disease, for example, we say like 24 or 48 hours. If the tick stays on you, then you have a much greater chance. But there are certain illnesses that are viral that, that's very, very quick that you could wind up with that disease.
And you guys did a phenomenal job on the gloves. And correct me if I'm wrong or anytime, or explain the gloves, but on the backside when I say the backside of your palm, if you hold both your hands up, the backside, looking down, that's where a majority of things are exposed for mosquitoes. And then the inside, you still made it so that we can grip. The Equinox Guard glove is fingerless on the pointer, and the thumb for your striker, your trigger, or but you can hide that stuff if you get into a batch of bad mosquitoes, but you can't move because that gobbler's there. The deer is, within the kill zone, and you need to be motionless. You have protection on some of the most exposed extremities.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The back of the hands typically where take mosquito bites. And I did a lot of field testing while using the gloves while whitetail hunting. So, and I set a lot of stands, especially like saddle guys that are hunting with saddles these days. We're hanging sticks quite often. And, you're reaching around the tree, your fingertips are hitting the tree, and then we're all climbing up. We're screwing in usually a hook into the tree, right, to hang your pack on, that type of stuff. And it's usually your fingertips that take the most abrasion. I found in the gloves. So we actually use in the fourchettes, which are in between your fingers. And then on your fingertips and like above your fingernails is all that nylon Cordura material. And so that's all really built around abrasion protection. Because if you just take a net, for example, and run it over your fingertips, it is going to start to show wear.
Right.
So we mapped in a lot of different textiles to get the longest life out of the gloves. Because gloves are something I go through probably most often. I think most hunters go through gloves more often than anything else from a wear and tear standpoint.
Absolutely. And so we have the Equinox Guard pant, the hoodie, and the gloves. And along with those lines, you guys have had very good success in your packs. Watch some of your videos on your whitetail packs, but you were also in combination with some others on your guys' new turkey vest.
Yeah, so my counterpart at work led the development. I did the Equinox Guard. My counterpart, Jim Sauvier, he's a great turkey hunter, a great turkey caller, and he worked on the Equinox vest, and it's a great run and gun style vest. Seat rolls right up against the lumbar of your back, so you can't even feel it. I'm sure anyone listening that has ever turkey hunted has had those little magnet flip-up seats, and they're just like clunk, 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 clunk on the back of your hamstrings as you're running. This one's very fast to deploy. It takes a little. I would watch his video on how to use the seat because it's not intuitive, but once you get it, you're like, holy smokes, this is great.
Right.
And then great magnetic pouch for your pot calls. Water protection for your strikers, which is critical. Water protection for your box call on your chest, and it's all just laid out. Like even the pots on usually your left side, because that's most hunters hold the pot with their left hand and the striker with their right. So it's actually laid out so you don't have to slip if you grab the two.
Yeah, and you can tell that somebody who is, I have right behind me in the shop here, I have 5 turkey vests from when I started 20 some years ago, back when it was run and gun, and yes, some of it was with a shotgun, but it's I've even had it to the point where you sit down and you're in a situation and all of a sudden your box call goes, or
yep.
in a situation where you're looking for your pick and your pot and your striker and everything. The moment I knew it was going to be phenomenal, but I didn't know it was going to be as useful until we got it in the shop and I tried it on. And I'm a big guy, and you guys did it right. You sized it from small to double XL. Basically, if you can use your thumb and in your forefinger, you can change the size of that. Everything is super adjustable. If if we're early season here and you got a little bit bigger jacket on, you just kind of make your vest fit. We get into when it's going to be pretty hot here in a couple of weeks, you can wear just that Equinox hoodie and it'll fit. And one thing that we said in our video is it's more like a very lightweight pack versus a big, huge vest. And I think that's huge. And I've never, ever been able to have a camel pack, water reservoir. And you don't even think about it because usually you're turkey hunting, let's face it, you go out in the morning. Maybe if you have to sit an afternoon set, you're not really worried about it, but now you have the capability. You don't have to have a water bottle that's scrunching in your side pocket or in the back pouch making noise. And turkeys, not only are they very visual, but also any little thing can upset them,
Absolutely. Their vision is very, very cute on movement. That's something with them. They actually have a excellent ability to perceive movement way better than us. Their clarity may not be the same as ours, but once you move, they gain their clarity very, very quickly. So, all of those things just laid out, again, like you were saying, once you start to use a hydration pack, you're like, why on earth did I do anything different? Just laying everything out where you can run and gun, you can crawl, you can do all the things that you like to do, because turkeys never wind up the way you expect them to come. Just the other day, 2 days ago, I was down in Georgia, and we were hunting near the opener for that. Birds fly down. We had set up. We thought they were just going to hook up in a road into the field. Of course, they didn't do that. They kind of scooped behind us, got into where there's some thick stuff behind us, and of course, we're having to flip around at the last minute to try and get set up for a shot. So they have an uncanny ability to go not where you expect them to go.
And as we were talking about, were you successful in that turkey hunt?
No, we unfortunately we had some pretty bad storms that came through Georgia this weekend, and there was tornadoes all through the area. They were quiet on the second day, so it was only a quick 2-day hunt. But we weren't able to close the deal there. But was lucky enough to get to an off deal a couple of weeks ago in Florida. So won't be a single season Grand Slam for me, but because I'll be on the Merriam's next year. So
I hear you. Speaking of, we dabbled a little bit about tree stand setup and big trail cameras. Some of you guys in the western states don't get to utilize them. Not all western states, but some. But is there anything coming out, or is there some stuff when we talk about abrasion resistance? The back 40 pant comes right into my mind. But is there insect shield on some other of your solid wares?
There are a few items in the line, if they're built for outside, that have the hanger pan isn't going to be. I believe it may be going away just now since the Equinox Guard is coming in, but it's built around tree stands, the Henley that goes along with that. So periodically, if there's gear that is coming out that is meant to be used during that season, we may put insect shield in the everyday line as we go through. The Equinox Guard is really the one that I've been focused on from a technical end use standpoint.
And I thank you again. Congratulations on the Equinox Guard and the turkey vest. Been very well received by all of our customers. And again, there's still plenty of time. As I'm looking outside right now, it's raining / snowing, so we're not looking at warm weather, but we're getting there. Just check it out at the shops. I encourage you to watch the videos that Sitka has released. You guys have done a great job kind of covering everything. In this day and age, people are social media freaks, and there's a wealth of information for free. You don't have to talk to somebody. You can watch it, and then if you do have questions, we're just a phone call or a shop away from trying the product on, fitting the right size. And I think we're going to kind of graduate into, like we said before, your bread and butter, the whitetail line. You guys have a very, very extensive line of big game. If you wouldn't mind, when people come in and we see it on bows and we see it on the camo, we only carry the Sub-Alpine camo pattern, and then also the Elevated 2 Optifade from Sitka. But you guys have some waterfall in that. But if you wouldn't mind taking the big game and the Elevated 2 and kind of dissecting how the patterns were invented. It's not just a color concept that you threw together. There's actually ingenuity and engineering behind it.
Yeah, they, the original Optifade development was around before my time, but it was more or less developed around where is it, what is it concept. So, the animals trying to identify, where, what's there, is it a threat? And that's essentially what the disruption's based on trying to do is break up your outline through the use of micro and macro patterns, and essentially matching the shading to the environmental aspect of what's out there and what you typically might face in a pursuit. So when you look at the big game, we're looking at like open country, for example, is a long distance Western based hunts, maybe with Sub-Alpine getting a little bit more closer engagement, and in Sub-Alpine, so below the tree line environment. And then Elevated 2 is really designed with a deer looking up with a high luminescence background into where the hunter's sitting, and that type of engagement. So usually a hunter in a tree stand, usually inside 40 yards.
And with that in mind, a lot of people will come in. So the human eye, when you look at, we have to appeal to the human eye, especially as a consumer, right? So a lot of guys will come in now that they have the education and they know that the Sitka stuff is actually gear and they can utilize it in different situations. Is there a big difference? Guys like to match their surroundings. In early season here, we still have the foliage is green and everything is really kind of close-knit quarters. Can you wear Sub-Alpine in a tree stand, on a field edge? Is it detrimental? Is there anything wrong with an Elevated 2 when it, to the human eye, it looks kind of white with grays and some blacks in the digital effect of that. Are you going to go wrong, or is it okay to wear the Elevated 2 anytime that you're deer hunting?
I typically will roll to Elevated 2. I think, from a consumer standpoint or a hunter standpoint, I understand the desire to match your background. The one thing is deer don't see in the same way that we do. They view the world in a whole different way. We are looking at a point in like we have a singular point, so we focus on like there's a stick, there's a twig. That's how we typically look because we have a single focus point. They're watching the world going around them, if that makes sense. So they can see it in a different way, and they have like a horizontal band for the retina. So basically, their whole focal point is different than ours. They kind of see in a they would need seeing eyeglasses if the regular world, if they were looking and standing at an immovable object. So if they're looking at something, they don't get the same clarity that you. That's why they're moving their head around, right? They're trying to move you across the retinal band to be able to get clarity. So when you see a deer doing that, they can't focus in the same way you do. That's why they're moving their head, but their ability to process movement is way better than ours. So I think a lot of people will focus maybe too much on those aspects of like I need to exactly match my environment. I think the brightness can definitely play a role, but I don't think you're gonna. If you wind up in either case, you're not gonna wind up in a terrible situation. There's a lot to do with patterns and the way those are set up. So.
And I'm glad that you laid that out. Sometimes that's the hardest sales pitch, because when you look at the beautiful display on the showroom floor or you're watching videos, but in the field, you have to put yourself in a deer's position, which is very, very hard to do because you just explained why. And as we talk your whitetail setups, I could have you just go through all of the stuff in the whitetail category from Sitka, and we'd be here for the next hour and a half. But what I would rather do from the expert, from the guy who designed all of these, with your team, early season, whitetail, let's just say September 1st. From September 1st to October 15th in that genre or that area of time, what would you be outfitting with? What is in your arsenal for clothing? And then the next step will go from October 15th through the rut to like November 15th and then late season. If you don't mind, kind of, let's start with early season. I booked a whitetail hunt, or I'm in my home state, rather it be Southeast or Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Montana, wherever it may be. What is in your pack? What are you bringing? Are you taking out of your truck? What do you have for clothing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and give people a couple of different options, depending on, you know where you hunt best and what's most important to you. From a standpoint of like an early season setup, I'll typically roll into the Equinox Guard now that that's out. That's what I've been using for the past couple of years. And so that's a real good setup if I'm going to be in a buggy environment. And I know everybody in Minnesota can relate to this. If you're going to be in those conditions, I'll run with the Equinox Guard system. But you do have another choice. Let's say that's not the way you want to go. You could go with the regular Equinox pant, and set it up where you have like a different style of pant that maybe is a little bit heavier. You're okay with, maybe you start more in the mild conditions where it's not quite as hot. That's another setup you can run. And, if moisture management is extremely important to you, like a core lightweight hoodie. So those would be your choice, either Equinox Guard or I would say regular Equinox pant with a core lightweight hoodie are really good choices. And then with each one of those, there are going to be, especially in Minnesota, Montana, where I am, even in the earlier season, there's going to be some cooler nights. And so I'll have a light insulation piece that goes along with my setup that's like a light puffy of some kind. And that's a great setup just to be able to add that either in the morning when you first get up in your stand, just to help take off some of the bite, or later on in the evening as the sun sets, just to add a little bit of insulation protection.
And the gloves on the Equinox hoodie, or in the hoodie, a lot of times I never wore a face mask ever up until Sitka. My first purchase was a Fanatic hoodie, and it was a little bit warm for early season. But like you're saying, if you're glassing in the morning, sitting up on the ridge, hunting the evenings, or if you get to your evenings and the sun goes down and the bite comes on just a little bit for the chill, having the face mask incorporated into the hood is a huge thing. Yeah,
and it's just nice from a little bit of extra concealment too. Is just to be able to throw that up on your face too when an animal's approaching, is to pull it up, and so you don't have to add another piece. It's kind of built all right in. So yeah, I think those things are great. And then as things start to cool, I start thinking about how I'm going to add windstopper, and I try and build everything into my kit. So I'm going to need to know what's going to get me through the rest of the season. So a lot of people don't think about this, but I kind of will set things up with number of hoods. I'll max my hoods out at 2. Like I can handle a core lightweight hoodie with maybe a Stratus jacket that has a hood, but I wouldn't want like a core lightweight hoodie, Fanatic hoodie, Stratus with a hood. That's just too many hoods.
Right,
so we have options in all of our layers, so you can get a similar build in maybe a product form, but without a hood, so you can build the system that's right for you. That's one of the things that a lot of people maybe aren't thinking about, but they should going into, is how are you going to stack these layers.
And then you're not using a base layer at this moment in time, correct?
Well, essentially, the core lightweight hoodie, I'll run the same base layer all season.
Okay.
Usually I will set up with the lightest weight base layer that I can for the entire season. So when it's late season, I'm hunting food sources, I'm actually running an extremely lightweight base layer next to my skin. And that's the whole point of that, is to get moisture off of your skin. So a lot of people think, oh, it's cold, I'm not going to use my foundational layer, but that's the whole point. We're talking about building a foundation. Your base layer is the foundation of your house, and then all the other elements of your layering system being built on top of that. So running a lightweight synthetic base layer that same core lightweight hoodie, for example, that you started with in the early season, if you put that into your kit, you should be running that all the way into the late season as well as your foundation of your layers.
And I really like the word you used, layering system. It's a system. We go back to turning clothing into gear. Because comfort, if you've never been a person who layers, if you're a person who wears your barn hoodie and then throw on a big, huge jacket, and when you get to the blind or the stand, you're sweating, and then everything's uncomfortable an hour into the sit, the system, the layering system, if you break it down, it doesn't take very much to learn it, and then you have that ability to go forth. As we step into that October 15th, the dreaded air quotes I'm making lull, going into November, getting into that rut, you're going to get into your morning sits and your evening sits, and into November, your all day sits. What do we jump up to next? We still have our layering system. We're always going to have our layering system, our base layers, but what are we graduating to next?
Yeah, so let's say I've got my lightweight base layer, my synthetic base layer, and then I've got that light puffy I mentioned before. The next piece that I'm going to typically add into my kit is the Stratus, which is a micro fleece face, or a light fleece face with a Gore-Tex wooden stopper laminate inside of it, which is really breathable. It's all designed about stopping or cutting the wind. And so I'll typically take a windstopper jacket or a vest, depending on which you prefer. And that will go on over that puffy, or it will just go on over my lightweight base layer. So let's say it's like 50 degrees, or in the upper 40s. Maybe I don't need the puffy, and I can adjust and use that Stratus directly over my base layer. Or if it's a little chillier, or if I'm a little cold-natured, depending on how your body chemistry is made up, I can put that puffy on and add the windstopper on top of that. And so I can essentially adjust as I need to with the weather conditions. And then for my bottom, again, I'll have like a lightweight base layer of some kind. I might have that Equinox pant on that I walked into the stand with. If it's just mild conditions, I can either add or remove to that. With a bib is typically what I prefer. Some people prefer a pant, like a Stratus pant, which is the same setup as the top, but it's just in a pant or a bib form. The reason I like to use bibs is because I, first of all, can adjust really easy in the stand. If I need to pull the whole bib off, I don't have to take off my footwear. I can vent on the side legs, all of those things. So I'll typically go with a bib. And then that way I can walk into my stand venting and dumping heat on the side, because I typically commit to my bottom layer for the hunt. And usually I'll vent on the way in or out. And then my top is the lightest weight that I can possibly stand going. So if I get out of the truck and I'm kind of feeling that cold in my bite, the bite that comes from the cold, when I get first out of the truck, I'm okay with that, because I know I'm going to be moving. And then I'll add my insulation when I get either to the base of the tree or up in the tree.
And then as we, you haven't filled that tag, or your shooter has not came by yet close enough for you. I used to dread late season, but late season can be one of the most productive times, especially if you have a food source. I'm a very big fan of Fanatic. The jacket, the vest, the bibs, if it's extremely cold and I'm not in a box blind and I'm sitting in a tree stand. Let's talk a little late season, because now we really dive into what do we need for a base layer, and tying it to what are you actually using for your outer layer.
Yeah, so let's say that I built that system up already. I've got my lightweight foundation, I got my puffy, I got my Stratus. You have a couple of options going in the late season. Let's say you're not super cold-natured. You could take the Fanatic vest, for example, and put it on over that Stratus jacket, just over your core. It puts a hand muff into the jacket. So the reason it has that kind of weird cross zip is so that the hand muff is built right into the outerwear piece. and so you can put your hands in there. So that's a system that would maybe get you down into some fairly cold conditions if you had some insulation or some something like the Fanatic hoodie and maybe even the puffy on that, the stress jacket, and then adding that on the Fanatic vest on the outside. That may be enough to get you through the system or through the entire season. But you guys deal with some extremely cold, sub-zero temperatures. And so that's where the Fanatic or in the incinerator comes in. The Fanatic is available in a jacket, and then it's also available in a bib. And I usually tell people, depending on what is most important to them, that's how they should decide between the Fanatic or the incinerator. So if ultra quiet, super warm and frigid conditions is important to you, and maybe late season archery is your setup, the Fanatic is where I typically tell people to go. Most Midwestern hunters, I typically guide in the direction of the Fanatic system. But if you're dealing with like a lot of wet sleet conditions, like a wet, frigid conditions, the incinerator is a great setup because the difference between the two is Fanatic is wind stopper with insulation built in. And then the incinerator is a true Gore-Tex rain gear. So that's it's for, and a lot of times I typically drive southern hunters into the incinerator system because they're dealing with like 28, 32, 33 degrees, rain, sleet, snow mixes, whereas in the Midwest, we typically are dealing with a dry snow, where it can build up on the outside of your shell, or some sleeting rains that aren't like typically all-day sleeting rains that you'd be wearing those for.
Absolutely, and it brings us into the Fanatic. I think is one of the most well-engineered piece of equipment that you can have, especially for a very avid archer. The jacket, the cross zip, having the ability for a call holder. It fits good with my Sitka bino harness because my muff is underneath of that. Even in a sitting situation, I can put 3 or 4 hot hands in that muff and still wear a light glove, rather be the new guard or when it's super cold, I don't really have to worry a lot about insects, but just having a glove that I can still use my fingers, be agility wise when it comes to it, pushing the rangefinder button, focusing the binoculars. I don't have to have a big, huge mitt, which they do make a phenomenal, it's an incinerator mitt, which you can take the muff off and your fingers it's a very light piece of material over your fingers, but you have that ability. But the Fanatic jacket, hands down, like you said, super, super quiet. We have the ability built in, if you're a right-handed shooter, on your left arm, the material switches, so it's not the fuzzy. It's made for your string, so it's not going to slap, it's not going to stick out. And then, like on the actual bib, there's different. I don't want to say different materials because I don't know if that's right, but it's the way that it's produced. You have your warmth where you have your warmth all the way through, but you also have materials for burrs, cockaburs, going through, some brush situations where things are quieter.
Absolutely. And from the original Fanatic, one of the first things that when I came to Sitka, started asking people, and the number one thing they wanted to solve in the Fanatic system was the burr pickup. So we mapped a certain type of textile over the front leg, into the crotch panels, along the hem of the jacket. Those are areas that you typically pick up burrs, is like under the hem of your jacket or along the front of your legs to make them easier to pluck off. So I learned that very quickly when I was using the systems. I would pay. I had very young kids at the time, so I'd pay them 5 cents a burr to pluck them off. And I quickly realized I was paying out a lot of money to my kids to pluck burrs off for me, but they would sit there for hours to do that. So didn't want everybody else to have to deal with that. So that's why we solved that. It was selfish. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's perfect. And Chris, this brings up a great point because we kind of dabbled on every item that we would use, what you use, what I use. But at Archery Country Podcast, we have what we call the Pro Shop Tech Tip of the Week. So we're going to take just a moment of your time and explain our tech tip of the week.
And now it's time for this week's Archery Country Pro Tech Tip.
All right, Chris, when it comes to whitetails, we try to fool their sight. We try to be extremely quiet. Some things that we have to be very adamant on, at least I'm very adamant on, I think you are too, is what we call scent. And there's no way, I don't care what material you've had in the past, if you're not adamant and you're not taking care of your clothing and yourself and washing down things, you can ruin a hunt in a matter of seconds. Give us your tech tip for washing Sitka clothing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest questions I get is how do I care for my Sitka gear? Because people are obviously investing quite a bit of money into their systems and they want to take care of it. The one thing I would say is don't be afraid of washing Gore-Tex gear, for example. That's actually good for it. To be able to clean it out, being able to dry it hot, can recharge the DWR. My essentially setup is at the start of the season, I will take my gear, I'll pre-wash it. I may put it in like a lemon shield bath or something like that, and then hang it and dry it, and then run it through the dryer to be able to finish out the drying process. And then typically my stuff that I'm wearing as a base layer throughout the season, I'm washing that more often. So things that are near my skin, I wash very, very, very often. As I go further away from my skin, I wash them less often, and I'll typically come from in a hunt, throw them in my ozone closet, and then air them out afterwards. And I'm just doing that. So all of the gear that's 2018 and newer, part of their standard process is going through an ozone bath, just to make sure, because there are some original materials that may be used in elastics on our suspenders that ozone wasn't friendly to because they're natural rubber. So that's what we do. So essentially anything that gets wet, really muddy or bloody as my outerwear, that's typically when I go through and wash it and dry it. Otherwise, I typically just dry wash it. And that's how I care for my gear throughout the season. So maybe my outerwear gear is only getting washed once or twice a season, but my base layers might get washed, 15 times. So that's just a big difference.
And when we say it as a sales pitch or when we watch it on any videos and people say the word polygene or antimicrobial, what exactly does that mean on our base layers next to the skin? What is that doing for us?
So polygene is essentially to stop odor build up. So if you take synthetic materials, they are known for getting a buildup or a scent to them. And polygene, we kind of look at as like little Pac-Mans, if you say that. So the smell or the molecules that are doing that, they're going through and kind of munching those and keeping the odor profile down so that it doesn't build up in your gear. So when you wash it out, you can flush all that away. It's mainly about stopping an odor buildup on your gear over time.
And you guys heard it from the boss himself. It's okay to wash your gear and wash your base layers quite a few times during the season, especially if you're wearing it a lot and sweat. I'm here to tell you, as a whitetail enthusiast, you're not going to be able to eliminate all odors all the time, but you can take practices to almost fool them most of the time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I would say also just some people out there too that maybe are washing some of your bulkier gear or your bulkier outer layers. I would suggest that you zip up like the pant legs on doing that. So if you've got an agitating washer, for example, think of this. Your agitating washer has a piece that's agitating the gear inside of those. And let's say one portion of your bib leg gets pulled in one direction and the other portion of your bib leg gets pulled in another direction. All of that pressure gets put on your zipper heads. And that's where I typically see when people are popping zipper heads is because they're running it through their washer. And then, so when you go through, dry it, do it essentially outside and then turn it inside out and dry it that way as well. And so that's a really good way to be able to run your system, but where your washer won't wind up grabbing a zipper head and busting it, which you can send it in for repair, but who wants to do that in the middle of the season?
No, I love it. And you said it, ozone safe. We can put it in our ozone bags or ozone closets, or if you have an ozone machine up above you in the tree stand, everything is completely good. It's going to work. I recommend it. Man, I got to tell you, Chris, this is an eye-opening experience. I'm glad we've been trying to get you on a podcast. You've been extremely busy with the release and everything going on there, but this gives a little bit more insight for guys and gals. They do have youth, women's, and men's sizing. Any tips on if you are sizing? It's more of some items are a sport fit. You designed it that way. The online you can get into their sizing charts and it lays everything down, just a few measurements and you'll have it. What are you telling guys, or you run into individuals who have questions on the sizing?
I would definitely encourage people to look at the sizing charts to get a better idea. Coming into the shop is a great way, obviously, to get over there and actually find out what's going to fit you well. There are people that are kind of tweeners in sizing, right? That just their body build, maybe they're a medium or a large on one side, and then they have to step up for other layers. So coming in the shop to see that is always a great idea to just try things on. But if you're going about another way, using the fit guides can help. I'm 5'8", 165, so medium is usually what I wear. Sometimes in the bottoms, I will step up to a large just because I've got kind of a muscular build on my lower legs.
I love it. And you can find all of their stuff. Their website is very, very easy. You can also stop on archerycountry.com, and our website duplicates that as far as what you need, where you need. But I highly recommend coming into any of our shops and talking to the guys and gals that are using this extensively, what products you need, because it can be a little bit overwhelming, but we can really dissect on where you're going. And if you have an out west hunt, which most of us Midwest hunters are only going to happen, every 3 years or 2 years, unless you're hardcore, there's systems for that. And we're trained, and we have a great group of guys. And the cool thing is we can always just call Chris, or we can call Dave and say, hey, I have a gentleman that's going on an elk hunt, and he's going to endure, because especially out west, if you're not happy with the weather, just wait 20 minutes and things can change for you.
Absolutely.
So the knowledge is here for it. We appreciate you being on, Chris. If there's any questions, you guys get a hold of us. There'll be a bunch of YouTube videos tied to this podcast and also on our social media pages. You can click the link below. But, buddy, I better let you go so you can get back to work. And congratulations on the release of the Equinox Guard and everything in the whitetail. We look forward to another season. And this is something that our listeners are going to like. We're going to have you back on. Come right in the heart of the season. May or may not be something that you want to tune into, because we may or may not have something that you want to listen to as far as products that are coming out. But Chris, it's been a pleasure, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. And yes, absolutely. If you have any questions, be sure to call in the shop. The team there is excellent, and they can help you be able to navigate and build the right system that's the perfect one for you.
Absolutely. On behalf of everybody at Archery Country Podcast, we'll see you on down the road.
Thank you for listening to Archery Country Podcast.